Hi everybody, so my name is Catherine Piante and I work in the ocean team at WWF France. I'm in charge of the Posidonia program and together with the WWF Mediterranean we now have a Posidonia program that works in around 10 countries of the Mediterranean. And so we have put together this training session, understanding that many of you are probably facing the same questions that we faced at the beginning of our work. So we're very happy and thank you very much for being here today. We are very happy to be able to present the results of our work and this training session to you. So welcome, and I give the floor to Amélie Foncouberta, our expert, who is going to give you this presentation. Thank you very much.
Alors bonjour à tous.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to do this presentation in French because actually I'm not a very good English speaker. My name is Amélie Fontcuberta, and I'm the one that will be training you. I will be the training for the 4 training modules. I remind you that this training is now focusing on the establishment of eco-mooring areas, basically for recreational vessels under 24 meters. So we're talking about a small pleasure boating. I am a consultant for WWF. I have a technical expertise on eco-mooring areas and their establishment. So before getting into the topic, let's have a quick round of presentations. Today we have participants coming from many different countries: France, Spain, Portugal, Morocco, Tunisia, Malta, Italy, as well as other countries far from the Mediterranean like Ireland and Scotland. And also we have Greece and Croatia. So it's very interesting because the management of pleasure boating is very different country by country. And so there are different strategies in different countries. And so it's very nice to have this diversity, which is going to be very enriching for our debate. If you have any specific expectations, please tell us in the chat if you have any expectations on these training modules. So we will try to meet your requests. So for those of you who actually are not working on the Posidonia, just to give introduction on Posidonia. Posidonia oceanica is a marine flowering plant which is endemic to the Mediterranean Sea. It's not a seagrass, it's a plant making flowers and growing. It has roots, rhizomes, fruits, leaves, and flowers. It has an estimated coverage of 1.5 million hectares in the Mediterranean, and it is present basically in all the countries, in all the Mediterranean countries. Posidonia meadows provide ecological functions which are key. They are a nursery habitat for hundreds of marine species. They protect the coast against erosion, and they can also store carbon on a long-term basis. It's one of the most effective systems for long-term carbon storage. And it can also improve water quality and water transparency because it can trap all the different particles inside the water. So these habitats are very sensitive, especially to physical damage. Today, about 34% of Posidonia meadows have disappeared over the last century. Boat anchoring is one of the main causes of Posidonia destruction, Posidonia damage. So this is recreational boating. Recreational boating that you can find everywhere. Recreational boating is one of the most growing activities in the Mediterranean. There's about 2 million recreational vessels in the Mediterranean and more or less 420,000 in the French Mediterranean area. So they concentrate basically on the small protected bays where there is Posidonia and Posidonia meadows. And recreational boating is evolving very rapidly. So there can be some boats that moor during the year, and then during the summer they go up to 100 boats mooring at the same time. And so there is a very strong impact from recreational boating on Posidonia meadows. Today we can find the scars dating back to 1970. From anchors, so each scar can stay for a very long time. And recreational boating is a very important economic activity in all countries. So the objective is not to eliminate recreational boating, but actually to better organize and manage recreational boating. So if you want to have further information on that, in the chat, you can see some links, and especially the Mediterranean Posidonia Network, or also you have WWF website where you can find quite general information and also specific numbers on recreational boating and Posidonia in the Mediterranean. As we said at the previous introductory webinar, there's going to be 4 training modules. Their main aim their main focus is mooring management, which is a major challenge for the preservation of marine ecosystems. And actually, you have to know that 2 complementary solutions exist, which we're going to talk about. The development of eco-mooring areas, for example, the ban on some areas, or the limitation of both sides. And then a second solution, which is the management of eco-mooring areas. So the establishment and management of eco-mooring areas where boats can moor rather than anchor. These are 2 complementary solutions. And WWF France has developed a methodological toolkit designed to facilitate the implementation of these 2 solutions step by step. And you can see it here on this slide. This is a toolbox with 8 thematic sheets that describe all the steps for the establishment of an eco-mooring area. So how you can implement a management strategy, the different types of regulations for eco-mooring areas, all the preliminary studies, small studies and major scientific surveys, works management, and also the economic models and possible fundings in order to establish eco-mooring areas. The aim was to provide a toolbox based on practical feedback. And this is how these technical sheets were drafted, based on practical feedback. So these are the trainings and the training content. So as I said, there's going to be 4 modules. The first module on recreational boating management with the definition of a strategy and the regulation. Then there's going to be a second module focusing on a general understanding of eco-mooring areas. So we will go step by step in the definition of an eco-mooring area. Module number 3 is going to focus on the technical specificity for the establishment of an eco-mooring area. And module number 4 will focus on the different management models in France and the financial aspect for the management of an eco-mooring area. So today we're going to talk about module number 1, so recreational boating management from strategy to regulation. This module is gonna last 1.5 hour maximum. So there's gonna be some questions at the end of the session, but you can also ask questions in the chat while I'm speaking, no problem with that. At the end of this training, we will give the floor to Sylvain Blouet, which is the Deputy Director of a marine protected area in France next to Montpellier in the town of Agde. I think that you received a presentation on Sylvain and Agde Marine Protected Area. 10 years ago, actually, this MPA has established an eco-mooring areas in order to manage diving activities and recreational boating activities. And Sylvain will be talking at the end of each module in order to provide us with his feedback and his experience. So let's get into the subject now. In this first module, we're going to answer 3 questions. So why is a mooring management strategy essential? How has it been implemented in France? And in our opinion, what are the key components for an effective mooring management strategy? So these are the 3 questions we're trying to answer. So before talking about what happens at a local level, you have to think at a national level or at a regional level, because you know that recreational boating knows no administrative borders. We have to understand what happens at a wider scale. Sometimes there are global strategies, there are rules of the game, and we're going to see together the characteristics of our national strategy. And in the chat, please tell us if you are familiar with your own national strategy in your own country, so that we can have an exchange and we can have a further input in our guide. So we have an example in the Baleares Islands. I'm not going to go into detail, but here you have a link in order to see a very nice and interesting video on what the Balearic Islands are doing. Since the year 2000, public authorities have seen a strong degradation of the Posidonia meadows and have implemented different measures, which you can see in this video. They have mapped the meadows, they have banned anchoring in the area, and they also have apps for recreational boaters, so that boaters know where they can moor and where they cannot moor. So I do invite you to watch this video. In the chat, you have the address to watch it. As I said before, in order to have an effective strategy, you have to know the number and size distribution of recreational vessels in your area. So you have to know how many vessels you have in your country, and what is their size. The size of the vessel is a key factor in managing mooring areas. Because small vessels can have, let's say, lower impacts than big vessels. It all depends on their size. For example, in the French Mediterranean coast, the French Mediterranean area, when the strategy was implemented, we counted more or less the number of boats, and we counted 420,000 recreational vessels out of 2 million across the whole Mediterranean basin. So this fleet is quite unbalanced because 98% of the total leisure boat boating fleet is less than 24 meters. So it's a small recreational boats. In 2019, the French Maritime Prefecture of the Mediterranean adopted a framework regulation which strictly forbids vessels over 24 meters from anchoring on Posidonia oceanica meadows. So these are this is the difference between a small and large recreational boating. So the threshold has been fixed at 24 meters. So why is there this difference? Because it was already existing. There were different regulations and different equipment for boats under 24 meters or over 24 meters. And this was also due to other reasons. It was shown by scientific studies in France that impacts can be very different. Large yachts cause much higher and stronger impacts because their anchors are much bigger, and then they train on the sea bottom and they cause scars of tens of meters sometimes. Larger pleasure boating has a different use. Usually vessels do not stay on the coast, but they travel further away to different countries offshore. And therefore, you cannot manage boating in the same way for a small boat or a large boat. Small boating still can provide an impact in terms of quantity because there are many small pleasure boats. Whereas for larger boats, large vessels, you only need to have one vessel of 60 meters and you may have very harmful impacts. So this is the difference between small and large recreational boating. And there are different environmental and economic challenges and impacts. This is why France has developed a Mediterranean marine management strategy. This strategy is integrated into a wider regulatory context at international level, for example. So we can think about the Barcelona Convention, whose aim is to protect the Mediterranean against all impacts and pollution. And then at European level, there is the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. Then you have also habitat directives protecting Posidonia meadows, and there are also planning directives for marine spatial planning. So all these strategies encourage and urge all member states to plan the different types of use at sea. So our national strategy in France comes from the willingness to protect the marine environment and is integrated into the whole regulatory context which I just mentioned. So the strategy was made in 2010 and is regularly updated. It was drafted by French Mediterranean public authorities, by the Maritime Prefecture, by the Regional Directorate for the Sea, and by scientific partners who provide feedback on the ecological status of Posidonia meadows and on the need to protect the specific areas. It is a public document. It is available to everyone. It is regularly updated. And it focuses on recreational vessels. So cruise ships, cargo vessels, or maritime workcraft are excluded. You can download it if you are interested. We're gonna send you the link for that, but it is downloadable as a strategy. The objective of the marine management strategy is first and foremost to reduce the environmental impact. So to reduce environmental impact on Posidonia meadows and marine habitats. The second objective is to regulate the use of the coastline so as to manage all the different types of use on the coast in order to avoid any use conflicts between the different activities, for example, boating, fisheries, swimming, diving, or transport at sea. And the third objective is an administrative objective. So the idea is to simplify and harmonize authorization procedures for the establishment of eco-mooring areas so that everyone plays the same game and we can establish eco-mooring areas and the relevant regulations in a faster way. The strategy is based on 6 main principles. So in France, we have these 6 main principles on the sea. First and foremost, first principle, the sea is an inalienable common good. Second, the development of the recreational boating sector must respect the marine environment and site landscape. 3, recreational boating must not be to the detriment of other marine activities. 4, eco-mooring must remain a temporary and seasonal practice and must not be used to make up for the lack of berths in ports. 5, recreational boaters' freedoms must go hand in hand with responsible behavior towards the environment. And 6, eco-moorings, buoys, must be used in environmentally sensitive areas. So these are the 6 main principles on which our French strategy is based on. Sorry, I can't see the slides anymore. There's a small bug. So, as for mooring management, there are 3 main approaches. The first one is to study what happens in each bay at a local level. So you have to know and understand what happens in a bay in order to make the right decisions and in order to use the right management tools in the area. Then there is an approach based on regulation and awareness. For example, there can be some no anchoring areas, or maybe there can be some raising awareness actions among recreational boaters. And then you need to organize. If there is too much pressure, too many impacts on a specific area, maybe it will be necessary to create eco-mooring areas. So you need to organize the things. So now questions for you. In your countries, do you know what options exist in order to regulate moorings? Do you have like no anchoring areas for all boats or just for some types of vessels? Are there any constraints? Are there any limits? Are there any specific areas where vessels can moor? And what measures can you implement on your coasts? In France, there are different ways to regulate and to raise awareness. The first one is a free anchoring. This is the first method. There are some areas that are not very sensitive, like a sandy sea bottom where there is no protected species or a sensitive habitat. So free anchoring can be authorized. This can be the case in a bay with a big sandy sea bottoms where the ecological impact is much more limited. So in that case, recreational boaters can go there very easily without no problem. So, and each boater is responsible for their own mooring. Then there are no anchoring areas where bans are envisaged. Oftentimes in areas where there are sensitive habitats or species like Posidonia meadows or coralligenous reefs. So let's say fragile habitats. Usually these areas are marked at sea. You can see them on nautical charts. And on them, there has to be strict surveillance because habitats are quite sensitive and fragile. And then there is a third possibility, regulated anchoring areas. Actually, there are, in general, two possible solutions for regulated anchoring areas. In most of these areas, there is a limit on the number of boats and a limit on the duration, on the mooring duration. Maybe they can authorize just during the day and not at night. And these areas are marked. And therefore, information must be provided to voters so that they know very well the rules in these areas. In addition to the regulation, in the French mooring strategy, national mooring strategy, there is also different forms of organizations. So organization that can be done. So I'm going to talk to you about the different mooring options implemented by France and what are the pros and cons for each option. So the first one is the authorization for the temporary occupation of an individual mooring on a mooring block. This is one of the possible options in the organization in France. You know what a mooring block is, right? It's like a lest. It's a ballast. It's an anchoring system, a permanent anchoring system with a ballast, which is very heavy, which is on the sea bottom, and a buoy is attached to that, and the vessel can moor on the buoy. So there are many advantages in this system. So boats are not anchoring on the sea bottom, so there is no impact from the anchor on the sea bottom. And there can be a more stable management of the mooring area. However, there are also some constraints in this method because when the system is not very well designed or is not of the right size, for example, mooring blocks can cause some impacts on the Posidonia meadow. And a ballast is connected to a buoy, and the chain sometimes can turn around the mooring block and can damage the habitat. So this is why today in France there are not mooring blocks authorized in sensitive areas. Actually, they are banned. But if there is a sensitive area nearby, there is no possibility to use a mooring block. And this is why eco-mooring areas are used, and they use the specific systems in order to avoid any impact.
So the other solution is the creation of collective eco-mooring areas that have buoys. And so the mooring is done on buoys that are equipped with eco-mooring systems. So there is no risk of damage on the Posidonia meadows. So you can better organize the maritime space, limit the impact on the meadows, and also have better mooring for the recreational boaters and their positioning. So the creation of such areas implies some previous cleaning of these areas. So, and if there are mooring blocks, they are removed. And so there is also some check on the frequency of such eco-mooring areas because it is important that do not attract more boaters than usual. This is a solution whose organizational management is in charge of the manager of the area and not of the boater. So if you set up an eco-mooring area, there is a manager of that area that is in charge of it and takes full responsibility. So we have hundreds of such areas in the French Mediterranean today, and we have been able to create this training relying on the experience gained through the creation of such eco-mooring areas. Now that we have seen the different options that exist to manage mooring, well, I want to say that this strategy has been implemented, and now we are going to see how you can shift from a theoretical strategy to some practical actions to be implemented in a given area. So let's start with phase one. First of all, you need to assess the environmental impact of the mooring for each hotspot. So you have to consider several factors. First of all, you need to map marine habitats, and in particular, the Posidonia meadows. So you have to carefully map sensitive areas and Posidonia meadows. But also, when you talk about sensitive habitats, you need to consider, for instance, also coral reefs. And the mapping is always done through diving, but today you can also use acoustic techniques like sonars or even drones. The final goal is to map the whole area that you want to manage mooring wise. After that, the second step is about analyzing the impact of mooring on such identified areas. So you need to count the number of recreational boats, try to better analyze and observe the mooring techniques adopted by these boats, and also have some analysis of the seasonal attendance by boaters of that given area. So seasonal pressure can lead to major degradation that could also get worse during the peak of the season. We always try to do this kind of analysis in France during the period of the peak of the season between April and October. Then, once all these data have been collected, you can overlap them to identify hotspots that become priority areas where to act and implement eco-mooring areas. This is a very important step because, I mean, it would be useless to apply such measures in areas that do not really require them. So let's move on now to phase two. Phase two is about drawing up a mooring management plan. So phase one is about the assessment. Phase two is about the operational response. So trying to see where people can moor, where people cannot moor, and where we can set up the mooring buoys. So each hotspot requires a specific strategy. Right. Let's see what we have done in France. Thanks to the overlapping of all the collected data, we have identified 116 target sites. And on each one of these sites, there was a high attendance rate, there were sensitive habitats, and potentially there were specific use conflicts to be better managed. So for each priority site that you see on the map, there were areas where it was necessary to regulate mooring and create, for instance, no anchoring, no mooring areas, no anchoring areas, or areas where anchoring could be allowed, and so on. So different hotspots with different needs. Well, phase 3 is about training the users and raise their awareness on the new practices that need to be adopted. Well, sometimes this phase is a little bit underestimated, but actually it's very important. It's crucial for the achievement of the expected goals. So it's important to raise awareness in users and make them understand that they need to adapt their mooring practices. Usually in France, we have recourse to specific tools such as signs, so located on beaches or at the entrance of ports, or you can use brochures in tourist areas, but also there are mobile applications that can be used by recreational boaters to see where they can moor and anchor. You can also launch campaigns on social media or also on physical sites. For instance, in the Mediterranean, we have a campaign called Eco Gestures that addresses pleasure boaters during the summer, and we have sensitized up to 25,000 pleasure boaters, explaining to them what they can do to limit the impact of their mooring and anchoring, and so what they can do if they get into an area that has sensitive area habitats. For instance, in the Balearic Islands, there are specific so supervising boats and so teams that have a special device and they can detect underwater where the anchors are located and then tell those boaters, please remove the anchor with a specific technique to avoid damage, and then please move in another specific area. So again, there are several actions that can be taken to raise awareness in pleasure boaters. And now we move on to phase 4. And that should be pretty obvious because phase 4 is about monitoring and enforcing the practices and the compliance with the regulations. So there can be marine patrolling teams, or you can use air drones. Of course, all that requires human and financial resources to be done, but you can also use in real time. So the specific automatic identification system that are usually installed on boats. Well, the vast majority of boats above 24 meters have them, but more and more, even boats under 24 meters have such devices on board. And in some regions, some participatory systems are used so that community of users share information about possible infringements by other boaters. Well, as to the French Mediterranean mooring strategy, well, I'd like now to make a short recap about what I've said so far. So some key ideas to take away, some take-home messages. First of all, our mooring strategy in the French Mediterranean let us have a very clear idea of what happens along our coast. So we got better understanding of our fleet, of the pressures in those areas. We could also identify hotspots. And so each manager, each municipality knew what the situation was and what could and should be done. And then, thanks to the strategy, we have been able to plan also the investments, the financial needs to be covered by each manager. Thanks to the strategy, we could also integrate recreational boating into spatial management and into specifically maritime spatial planning. I don't know if you have questions so far. Sorry, I didn't have a look at the chat, so I don't know if you wrote questions on the chat. So please let me know if there are questions. No? Well, some people have written comments about the French national strategy. For instance, there is a comment about Greece and the fact that there is a guide for the surveillance and enforcement guidelines for marine protected areas based on the case study of Giaros. So there are some additional info about French strategy and also, well, yes, other things like that. But please, if you have questions, do not hesitate. If you have questions about what you heard so far. Well, if there are no questions, I will move on to sheet number 2. So sheet number 2 of the guide that I presented at the beginning, it's part of this module, and it's an overview of the regulatory measures used in France to monitor mooring activities. So sheet 2 is a real mapping of all the available tools. I'm really sorry, but because of a bug, I just lost the sight of my presentation. So I think we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So we're going to see the regulatory measures that can be implemented and also how they're used in France and how they can be adapted to other countries. So regulatory measures can be very effective, especially if properly designed and if combined to surveillance and awareness raising work. So a regulatory measure is a rule that let people better organize spatial planning and management. So these rule can cover an area allowing specific activities or can be a rule banning other activities. But still, it's a rule that defines conditions for use of a specific area. So in France, we have several marked zones. We have other kinds of zones, but certainly these are some of the most common ones. We have, for instance, the no anchoring areas. So in such an area, it is strictly forbidden to anchor. And very often these are areas where there are coral reefs or corals or sensitive habitats or Posidonia meadows. So this is one of the most effective measure to protect a sensitive habitat. But you require so very good communication to inform users and also a minimum of surveillance to make sure that people comply with such a rule. And then you have areas close to motorized vehicles. Well, on such area, motorized vehicles are not allowed of all kinds. So these areas are often created close to areas where people can swim, and also they are closer to protected areas to reduce the acoustic impact, for instance. So usually such areas are implemented to reduce the level of acoustic, nuisance, and to also have more safety for people bathing. Then you have areas reserved for bathing and swimming. Usually these areas are very close to the beaches, and you have small and numerous yellow buoys marking them. And of course, boats are not allowed into these areas. And usually these are areas to, guarantee the safety of people, so swimmers, people enjoying the sea. Another specific area are the channels. So channels are put in place in order to organize the boat traffic. Often they are created close to ports or closer to piers, and they are always connected to the access to terrestrial areas. And well, if we have a larger bathing area, it is possible to have a channel that is created in the middle of them in order to allow boats to get closer to the beach, to the coast. And then you can have another specifically regulated zone that are the eco-mooring areas equipped with buoys, and they can also be marked and tagged. So usually they are marked on nautical maps, and so for each one of such regulated areas, in France at least, you have color codes. So you have a specific color coding system. And actually, the colors have always remained the same. It's the shape of the buoys that can vary. Well, no, sorry, it's the other way around. So I'm thinking about the buoys that I see. So, for instance, you have different colors to for the buoys marking the entrance or the exit of ports, but still, so there are specific rules also for the color and shape of the buoys, and also the anchoring systems, even when allowed, needs to be respectful of the environment. And so now I will focus on mooring areas, even though I have already talked a little bit about that. And the next time we're going to specifically talk about mooring areas, but I'm going to give you a flavor of the topics that we'll be dealt with next time by saying a few things. So mooring areas are equipped with the ecological buoys. So boats are allowed here, and they need to use ecological anchoring systems that are respectful for the environment. And so the anchoring needs to be respectful of the seabed, and the buoys are put in place in order to organize at best the maritime space and improve the safety in the area. And this is something that we find a little bit everywhere in the Mediterranean, Spain, France, Italy, Greece, and some marine parks have become the main managers of pleasure boating, of recreational boating. So they know this solution very well. Well, let's go back to some take-home messages. Well, these are five key elements. So, regulating recreational boating activities and raising awareness helps ensuring harmony between maritime user groups. So, it is important to define each use. And it increases the safety at sea and contributes to better preserving marine ecosystems by reducing environmental impacts, specifically on Posidonia meadows. And regulation by itself is not enough. Awareness raising is key, communication is key, and sometimes also creating no anchoring areas can be very helpful. So a combination of all these things is the most effective solution. I don't know if Sylvain is connected. Otherwise, we can take questions if there are any. Okay, Sylvain is connected, and I think that there are also questions. Well, we have several questions in English. One about the marine spatial planning in relation to eco-mooring. So which aspects of ecological mooring are specifically, covered by marine spatial planning? And I think that some MPAs are mentioned in the guide. And so I don't know if you want to start with this. Well, that would have been the best conclusion for Sylvan presentation because, well, this is certainly a very important tool to manage recreational boating, especially also if there is an MPA. So banning anchoring is very important, especially if there are sensitive habitats. And the creation of eco-mooring areas has become a crucial element to manage recreational boating, especially in the presence of a protected area. Thank you very much. And then we have a contribution by Eliana Ferretti about Italy. I don't know if you see the chat. It's about the measures that have been taken about anchoring on Posidonia meadows. So, do you think that the national legal framework is a prerequisite so that so recreational boaters and operators do not anchor on Posidonia, or are you aware of examples where local measures and bottom-up approaches have been successful in regulating anchoring and eco-mooring in certain areas?
Vas-y,
Sorry?
Catherine.
Yeah.
This is Catherine. Maybe I can
okay.
answer because I
Yeah.
have information about this. So actually, there was a study done a couple of years ago on which countries have a regulatory framework regarding forbidding anchoring and also the possibility to set up eco-mooring areas. And that study was done in all Mediterranean countries. And the conclusions were that I think 3 countries have a legal framework at national level about the possibility to forbid anchoring and also to set up an eco-mooring field. So only 3 countries out of 21 have this regulatory framework available. So my answer is yes, definitely it's much better if you have a regulatory framework at national level. It will make your life much easier. Whether you can actually do something without this national framework, I'm not sure. This is probably something you need to check with your legal specialist in Italy. But I guess you have, if I remember well, in Italy you have possibilities with the regional level. The regional level has some authority on a number of issues. So maybe through that level you can maybe manage to actually do something. But it would be really useful that all the concerned experts, people, managers, practitioners work together to propose a national framework to your government.
I don't know. Amélie, would you like to add anything? Well, I'm referring to a comment about the fact that between 2019 and 2020, there was a regulatory measure adopted about the banning of anchoring of boats between 20 and 24 meters, and that had a major impact on the recovery of Posidonia meadows. So again, and that was very effective. But then having a national framework is very important. Well, the the piece of legislation that you mentioned was just a French thing, and well, certainly the best thing would have to be to have such a framework at European level. And the WWF Mediterranean carried out a study to identify the hotspots that show the presence of boats above 24 meters. And we have we have made several proposals at different levels, including the Barcelona Convention, in order to implement the banning of anchoring on Posidonia meadows for such boats in the whole Mediterranean basin. So that was the idea, to propose such a ban all over the Mediterranean for boats of more than 24 meters. There is a last question by Pudrilla. Thank you very much for your question. So from your experience, it is a question: how effective are eco-mooring systems in protecting seagrass habitats compared to traditional anchoring? So from your experience, how effective are eco-mooring systems in protecting seagrass habitats compared to traditional anchoring? So this is the question. Well, I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit. Well, in module 3, we are going to illustrate all the different technical aspects. So we're going to see the different anchoring systems proposed today to avoid impact on Posidonia meadows and seagrass meadows, so that are possible through buoys and mooring blocks. I can mention a couple of them today. So instead of using a cement block, maybe these are the traditional anchoring systems that you mentioned. We have other specific anchors with a screw that have no attachment to the seabed, and these systems preserve the meadow. And so then if you use a buoy, well, the chain, of course, should not be able to tear the meadow by rotating. So you can use additional little buoys, elevating the chain, so preventing the chain from going down onto the bed and, uprooting the meadows. And then what challenges are usually faced when installing eco-mooring systems in coastal areas? And are eco-mooring systems cost effective for marinas and local authorities in the long term? These are some additional questions. But I think that maybe you are going to talk about this later on, maybe during the next modules. I don't know, but these are some additional questions. Oh, yes, definitely. Yes, these questions are going to be tackled during module 3. Well, as to costs, well, essentially, I will share with you examples based on the French experience. And then certainly there are differences in that respect if you take different areas of the Mediterranean and also different regions. But we're going to talk about this during module 3. And I think that this is all. And then there are other comments. And yes, that's it. So I can give the floor to Sylvain Bouet. We have seen the different regulatory measures that exist to organize the uses, but maybe you have questions about what really happens on the spot, and that goes beyond, strategies. So yes, I think that you want to know more. Yes, as to Cap d'Agde, Cap d'Agde is close to Montpellier in France, and you should have received a very short project presentation sheet. I hope that you had the chance to have a look at it. And as to, well, Sylvain, I give you the floor so that you can share a presentation about the beginning of the project. And I think that everything started locally.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So I'm going to share my presentation. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me here to share my feedback on eco-mooring areas. I will not speak too much because I know that there are many training modules and therefore I need to focus on a specific aspect in each module. So maybe we will be talking about technical elements in the future. Here I will talk to you about the origin of this project and what we have done on field. and how you can promote the establishment of an economic mooring area in a territory. So this is where we are. So we are the manager of the Natura 2000 site called the Posidonie du Cap d'Agde. This is a marine protected area, a Natura 2000 site with 6,200 hectares. This MPA is managed by a municipality, the town of Agde, south of France. Before there was an association, and then the management was taken over by the municipality, and therefore the eco-mooring area was first created by the association and then taken over by the municipality. So we have management objectives and conservation objectives. And one of the first and most important objective is the conservation of the natural heritage. And there are different habitats like Posidonia meadows, small rocky bottoms, or the coralligenous reefs. And there, in the framework of our steering committee, of our management board, let's say, which is our management committee collecting different stakeholders, as in divers, fishers, and public authorities, we wanted to identify local strategies in order to limit the impact of mooring on these habitats. Next slide, please. Since the beginning, because as Amélie said, there are different intervention levels before creating an eco-mooring area. And then one of the first things that we did was to really understand the ecological status and to have a very good knowledge of our environment. That was very important in order to have a good mapping of marine habitats, to understand exactly where Posidonia meadows were located. So we made different maps and studies which were very detailed. And this is very important. You need to be very detailed when you want to establish an eco-mooring area. It's a very precise work that you need to do, because when you have to choose where you're going to put future facilities, then you have to really be very detailed and very precise. So basically, we had two habitats that we wanted mainly to protect. Posidonia meadows and Gorgonia populations with rocky bottoms. So we made maps and we measured the different impacts caused from both anchors and also other types of moorings. Moorings that were put by boat clubs here and there. And here you can see on the picture a chain which is on a rocky area, around a rocky area, and on a Gorgonia, and the impact that it can cause. So after mapping in detail all the different habitats that you want to protect, after you know where they are, it is important to focus on the different types of use. So usage. You exactly have to know what types of use are present in the area and what kind of impact they can have on the habitats to be protected. So for almost 2 years, we made a specific study on tourists in order to understand the number of boats, the length of boats, the time, the duration of stay of boats, why these boats came here. And we have seen, especially, the presence of recreational vessels in an area near the port, inside the marine protected area, where there are many recreational activities. So this is essential, as in a mooring area must be delimited in space. So there has to be a good spatial marking because there are mooring areas everywhere on the coast. There are boats anchoring everywhere along the coastline, but you have to understand where anchoring can have an impact on the habitats. And therefore, it is important to understand that in order to understand whether you have to intervene and to limit the impact in order to protect the habitats. So you have to very well identify the sectors, and you need to have a tourist frequentation study in order to mark the future area where you want to establish an eco-mooring area. So after mapping and after identifying the sector, after identifying the impacts, measure the impacts, study the habitats, assess the number of visitors, the different types of use in space and time, then you have all the different key elements so that you can discuss with users on how to manage the area in order to limit the impact and to optimize the conservation status of habitats. So this is a consultation phase with local users and also with state and public authorities. And this is connected with the national strategy and national regulations. So you're not just working at a local level, but you also have to make reference to national strategies, identifying the behaviors, the practices to be used, so that the public authorities involved in the consultation procedure know what they can do and up to where they can go. So when we started working in AGD, the national strategy did not exist yet. It came later on. But today it's easier because when there is already a national strategy, public authorities and state authorities already know what to do because usually they're not experts in the field. And so they already have some guidelines and can, let's say, accept the proposals. And this is essential. The mooring area is not a new port. We don't want to create new ports. We are there in order to meet conservation needs of habitats and to limit impacts. So we want to reduce impacts and pressure. We don't want to increase the carrying capacity of the area. This is done by ports, but not by us, but not by mooring areas. And this was well defined with the public authorities. So a coordination has been made. And once there is a coordination between technicians, between local stakeholders and public authorities, then you can define a project And you can also look for funds, search funds, because you also need to pay for eco-mooring areas or mooring areas. They are expensive. I think you're going to talk about that in the other modules. I will be talking about costs when talking about that in the next module. But in any case, it is expensive. It requires investment. As for investments, there are direct investments, implementation investments, and management costs per year on an annual basis. So management costs have to be paid on a long-term basis. Therefore, you need to have a financial strategy on a very long-term basis in order to maintain mooring areas and in order to meet all the needs related to mooring areas. We envisaged different alternatives. So we wanted to establish a mooring area, although there are other existing solutions, as already said. And we focused on a mooring area, the establishment of a mooring area, because when discussing with local stakeholders, this area enabled boaters to, let's say, stop and enjoy the sea. And we didn't want to ban anchoring in this area because it would have been difficult for boaters to have another area where to moor. And when you have a ban, pressure would have shifted to other areas where it was more complicated because there were many boats crossing the sea. So we didn't want to ban mooring, but let's say that mooring areas. A mooring area could, let's say, provide a good response to our needs. The mooring area in Agde is totally free of charge, so boaters are not paying in order to moor on buoys. This is a service we provide, so its costs are totally covered by the municipality of Agde, and its maintenance and management are paid by the municipality. And we provide awareness raising activities, and we're also working with boaters. Managers can support eco-mooring areas with stakeholders and with users, and this is what we do. In France, you also have to get the approval from local nautical commissions, as in a working group collecting all the stakeholders, divers, boaters, fishers. So there is a good synergy between the project manager, state authorities supported by users that are usually consulted in order to define the number of buoys. And this is why it is important to study the area in terms of tourists and boats, because you have to decide how many buoys then you need to put in an eco-mooring area. This is not always very easy to do, and therefore you need to have specific study on tourists and boats. So then a project is identified, and the project must be realistic and operational. An eco-mooring area must be something meeting specific needs. and adapted to local users so that people use it. I hope I haven't been too long. So I know that over in the next modules, I will go into more technical details. In any case, this was a general outline of how this project on AGDA came about. The eco-mooring area was done in two parts. The first one was made in 2005, the second one in 2012. It took some time. So I'd be very happy to give you some more feedback on what we have done at a local level in Agda. I don't know whether you said it. You also have managed some diving activities, right? And not just recreational boating. Yes, diving is also causing impact on the Posidonia meadows and on coralligenous reefs. And I believe that in the eco-mooring areas and eco-mooring buoys, there are also buoys for diving boats, right? Yes, correct. There were diving activities in the mooring area, which is divided into two sectors, but I will tell you more about that next time. In any case, we have buoys only for diving activities. These were diving sites. And when we discussed with divers, it was complicated to imagine for divers to get on the area without having buoys with clients and customers on board. So there are specific buoys, 3 buoys that are just used for diving activities and for diving clubs. Also, safety is important. When you create an eco-mooring area, I mean, it can be seen on the water, so boats do not go fast in that area because you can see that boats have a more than stop. They can go snorkeling, and so there is a higher safety in the area. When we started debating with stakeholders in 2005, it was very complicated. People, users, couldn't imagine to use buoys and more where they usually went on their own. So there was some sort of conflict, especially with some users, even with some state authorities. It was complicated with public authorities to imagine an eco-mooring area. But in the end, today, some time ago, we discussed once again with local stakeholders, they couldn't do without this eco-mooring area. Now this eco-mooring area is really part and parcel of the management of the area, which meets specific needs. People are happy to use the eco-mooring area, and taking it out today would be impossible. They couldn't live without it. So they have become owners of the eco-mooring area. So when it is well organized, when it is well designed, and when you have a good consultation process, eco-mooring areas are essential tools for the management of a site. But you need to take some time so that users approve your approach and do not reject it. But you need the time for that. Yes, there's a question. We're going to mix 2 questions. This is something that we're not going to talk about in the other modules because I'm going to talk about the preliminary studies. And you talked about the fact that frequentation surveys were very important. Tourist surveys and boat surveys were very important. How did you do that? How did you count the boats? What was the method used? And in addition to that, there are different consultation steps that have been made in order to understand the types of use. So you count the boats, you measure the boats, but why did these boats go there? What was the reason why they were there? As for the frequentation study, we made it over 2 years, not throughout the year, but in a specific sector where there were moorings. So especially during the summer, so from May to October. So for 2 years, from May to October, we counted every day all the boats that were present in the area. It was hard work. It took a lot of time. But since there was the island, there was somebody on the island, there was somebody from the MPA that was present on the island, and counting all the boats from May to October, and put the boats in a specific sector in order to really understand the location of the boat. Then we assess the size of the boat, the duration of mooring, so how long they were mooring, weather conditions while they were mooring, and the number of people on board of each boat. And also, we made surveys directly with users in order to understand why they came there, why they were interested in coming to that site. If these boats were usually moored in local ports, or if they came from different geographical areas, what type of activities they were doing there, just to swim or just to stay on the boat, or just to eat on the boat and then go back. We did the same thing for professional activities, for example, diving. So the number of divers, the duration of diving rotations, the level of divers, how long they stayed underwater, if it was free diving or organized diving, if there was passengers, transport boats, what type of boats, what was the route. In order to understand the situation and in order to really assess the area and then define the specific number of buoys that could be put in the eco-mooring area. That really allowed us to understand things. We have added some buoys over the past 10 years, so it was also important for us to have quite a big spatial area in order to add buoys if needed. We didn't add many. Today we have 44 berths, 44. And we added 4 buoys. There were 40 before, now we have 44 buoys and therefore berths. So now we continue the studies. It's not that we actually studied the situation at the beginning. We continued the frequentation studies over the years. They are less frequent. We don't always count the boats, but every year we try and update the attendance, the frequentation studies for boats in order to understand how things evolve. We added some buoys in some sectors, but in some other sectors we also took away some buoys because users were no longer using those buoys. So we took away the buoys, for example, and we moved them to other sectors. Every year, you need to update the data, and you need to have a good knowledge of the sector. And you needed to maybe change the organization of the mooring area. So it's something which is quite dynamic. It's not static. So you need to update things and you need to anticipate things. And the system is always evolving. So we have seen that many people bought some small boats, so there was an increase in the number of boats with boaters that were not really familiar with the environment. So maybe also the boaters were less familiar with boating, and therefore sometimes the buoys were damaged. Um, Thank you, Sylvain. I see that there is one last question by Anna. Can you please uh, repeat the detail about the moorings being free of charge? So the moorings which are covered by the local government or the local authorities. Yes. So the annual management costs are covered by the municipality of Agde, by the town of Agde, fully. Just to give you an idea, every year it's a cost of about 1 million 40 €1 million. No, 1,000 euros, sorry. Free of charge because the people using the mooring areas, 20,000 euros per year. Thank you. So the port is managed by the town of Agda. This is a service. This is a service on the territory. And then we had estimated that there was also a cost for the people that had to get the money from the boaters. It was, I mean, it would have been more expensive to pay somebody to go and get money from boaters to use the buoys than to cover the management costs. So there was a personnel cost which was quite high. Otherwise, buoys should have been much more expensive, and that was impossible for the type of users that we have. We don't have mega yachts in Agda. We have small boats and small boaters. So we have boats from 5 to 7 meters on average. So it's a small boats. And we couldn't imagine imposing a very high cost for the day. So this is a service. This is a service that is provided by MPA. So we are meeting the need of limiting pressure and impacts on habitats through the eco-mooring areas. And this is what we wanted to do. So 20,000 euros per year. I hope I've answered your question.
Are there other questions? So Catherine reminds that there are different technologies to monitor the attendance. And also there is a link to download a specific document about the different techniques and methodologies that can be applied. Well, I think we can close. We can wrap this first module. So the idea is to stick to this duration in order to continue this work on the establishment of eco-mooring areas. We have talked about the regulatory aspects, the good grounds of such eco-mooring areas, and step by step we are going to delve into the technical aspects of the issue. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for taking care of the organization. So thank you. And so see you next Tuesday. Thank you. Thank you. And goodbye, everybody. See you next Tuesday.